All right, 7:13. Welcome into Wingin' It Wednesday. All three panelists are here. Warren Cottle, Stafford Barnett, and Carol Ross. At this point, the earrings are still on.
Yeah.
So
get ready.
She's getting ready. We're getting ready for a street
Stafford,
fight.
take your earrings off.
I don't want them to pull on my earlobes.
Yes. Stafford, go ahead and
Do I
take
have
them
to
off.
remove all my piercings?
All your piercings, sir. I'm sorry.
Go to the restroom.
It could get very violent.
I'll be back.
TMI.
Be violent.
TMI.
Anyway.
This might take a minute.
Welcome in. Anyways.
That's why we call it Wingnut Wednesday.
Yes.
Just kidding.
Well.
You're funny. You're
Welcome
funny,
in.
Thanks.
Welcome in. Last night, big election night. We have a ton to talk about today. We are, by the way, in case you're holding your breath for us to talk about LUS, we will get to that too. Don't you worry. All right, so let's start we'll start with you, Stafford, since the mic is over there by you. Thoughts about last night overall? Seems like it wasn't necessarily a wave either way, but Democrats have control of the House, and a lot of people are hopeful that maybe that means we'll at least have some movement on something and it won't just stop.
I think both sides got what they wanted. The Democrats wanted to take control of either the House or the Congress or the Senate. They chose the House, and they did a phenomenal job of winning what they wanted to win. The Republicans were able to hang on to some of the Senate seats. Some of the races that, look, a year ago, if you just said that a Democrat stood a chance in Texas, that you'd have been laughed out. And Beto O'Rourke put on a hell of a show. I was glad to see. I was sad to see Steve King win. I was sad to see Devin Nunes win. I was glad to see Scott Walker lose. It looks like Scott Walker's Foxconn deal might be the biggest bamboozle on the citizens there in a long time. So it was definitely the results were interesting. I think the most interesting result of everything, though, is that the Democrats. Everybody assumed that the Democrats were the only people who were going to be engaged and ready to go vote. And that was not the case. Both sides showed up. I think we had 50% turnout in Lafayette Parish, which is phenomenal. And that gives integrity to the process. Also, we saw a very large youth vote, which is something that people have complained about for a long time. Like, when you look at who's got the most...
Especially with the midterm. There's no president, no senator on here.
Especially the midterm. When you look at who's got the most vested interest in elections, it should be the youth, right? They have to deal with these consequences the longest.
Well, and they need to take care of us old people. Let me just throw that in there.
Look,
okay, I interrupted. I'm sorry.
Look, that's what happened yesterday. So look, with my personal opinion is that things get done at a higher rate and with better results when you have a mix of control. And what happened last night with the Democrats taking the House is now we have a Congress who will check the powers of the president like it's constitutionally responsible to do. It will protect Medicare. It will protect Social Security. One of two things is going to happen. Either everything's going to shut down and stop working, which I hope that's not the case. But I believe that that's not what's going to happen. And I'll tell you why. Trump called Pelosi last night, called her and said, hey, we got to still keep getting things done. And you can say what you want about Pelosi. I'm not a fan of her, but she's never lost a vote on the floor of the House. There's a reason that Democrats absolutely love her. So she's probably going to be the next Speaker of the House. And look, if something dumb does happen, if the Mueller report comes back and it says that Trump ends up being bad enough that Trump gets removed from office, which I doubt's going to happen, that puts Pelosi in line to be the Vice President of the United States.
Let's move the mic on down on that note. So, Warren, we were talking about this earlier. Is she the de facto? Stafford did mention about her ability to get votes. I will remind people she was also there on Inauguration Day in the Oval Office when Trump was signing his initial everything, standing right over his shoulder. And I think that surprised a lot of her people. So do things get done at a faster pace, or does it create a logjam?
Well, we're going to see. I don't know. That generally speaking, the Congress is a little bit more conservative than the Senate. The Congress doesn't really just march lockstep normally, but we're not living in what was normal a few years ago. And whether that's good or bad, I'll reserve comment on it. But, I do think it's good that I think it's bad when people up there just vote lockstep regardless of the issue. The leadership tells them you got to vote this way, so I'm gonna have to vote that way. Well, after all, she is our leader. After all, he is our leader. So we got to vote, and that's sad. But I thought last night was pretty interesting night. The thing I think that gets me is you see so many of these races now that are just razor thin, and look at the one in Carencro where I think it was only just a handful of votes separated
23.
Three candidates, and
I'm sorry, that one. Yeah, that
Scott
one
was 23.
Yeah, that was.
That was
a
even
margin
closer.
of 20 votes there.
Yeah.
Even maybe less.
and you see some of these congressional races and Senate races and such stuff are just almost the same thing. It comes down to just a handful of votes here and there. But I think that the good thing about it from Trump's side is that some of the senators that were elected last night, the new ones, Republicans, are more in line to support him, just like Marsha Blackburn in Tennessee is replacing Bob Corker, and a couple others, and the one in Indiana, and so then you still got the two, Montana and Arizona, as to how that's going to go. But it looks like unless they find some more votes that McSally will be elected in Arizona and the Republican in Montana.
So, Carol, I wanted to ask, excuse me, Warren, you just
I know
got me
you're all
choked up. I wanted to ask about that because in watching some of the analysis last night, we had kind of gone back and forth between here. I was watching CNN when I got home, and one of the things Jake Tapper said was, look, the Republicans who decided to break from Trump and say, no, we don't want you, we're not going to be in lockstep with you, we don't want you to come to our rallies, those are the ones that didn't win. And the ones that did can credit him, is the opinion.
You mean, Trump wisely focused on the Senate.
Yes.
He knew the House was going to be a beast anyway because of the number of Republicans who retired because of redistricting. They know that most of them were redistricted out of their districts, and they just, they were ready for retirement, whatever. There were so many of them. There was just, numerically, it was almost impossible to try to hold on to the House. Although it was probably a little closer than they thought it would be, maybe.
Yeah. It was. I think the margin was smaller. It was no wave.
It wasn't a wave. It wasn't a wave.
We
But
were
they
hearing
still
from the
took
White
over.
House even before.
But anybody who's worried
prepared.
about a divided government, I would refer you to the last 2 years of how the Republicans have fought Trump in many areas. So we've had a divided government because if the Republicans had gone along with a lot of Trump wanted, including the wall and more in way of tax cuts and deregulation, it might have been a different story in the House, although I doubt it because the numbers just, you look at the demographics, the numbers just weren't there. But the Senate, Trump got out there, and I am telling you, they owe him. They owe him, and Mitch McConnell owes him, too, for giving him a bigger margin to work with. And Trump very wisely, I know a lot of people think he's thinking 5 steps ahead of most people. I think the guy has thought about this a long, long time and understood that the judiciary was where he was going to be able to make the biggest difference, and that's what he's doing.
So do issues like the wall become further from reality now?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. And I think there's, because some of the Democrats who ran supported the wall. Some of them lost, but they still, realized that this is a big issue out there. And by the way, it reinforces everything that happened in Florida and Texas. Razor thin in Florida. A lot of Puerto Ricans voting in Florida, speaking about the Puerto Rican girls who take off their earrings before they fight.
Oh my gosh.
Like you say every week.
Well,
take off my earrings.
You take them off. I'm just not lying.
Yeah. So anyway, to do battle.
Yeah.
But look at the influx of Puerto Rican voters there, and in Texas, the number of immigrants there. And the problem is, and Trump has identified that as well, that if we continue to allow unfettered immigration, illegal immigration into this country, we're going to continue to have these problems. I mean, their goal, the Democrats' goal all along, and they poured millions of dollars into both races from big donors like Tom Steyer, Hollywood Left, all that kind of stuff, to try to flip these states. Those are the last two big prizes for the Democrats, Texas and Florida.
If the Puerto Rican vote was going to be such a huge decider, why did we see it so close then with Gillum in the governor's race?
Well, because I think there's some people who just can't bring themselves to vote for a socialist.
Even
and he was way out there. I mean, he was way out there. and had some ethical issues as mayor of Tallahassee.
All right, Stafford, you can wrap this one up. Then we're going to move on to the local issues.
Yeah. So I'd like to point out that Mitch McConnell could have gotten the Senate 100-0, and it still wouldn't get this wall done. I think the biggest thing that came from last night is what type of Democrats won. The Democrats, the pendulum is swinging back, right? So it was centrist Democrats who won. Democrats who got there and said they wanted to impeach Trump or they wanted to ban assault rifles. Those are the ones that lost last night. The ones who won were they were pro. There were a couple who were pro-life Democrats, and you heard the campaign that was being ran by Democrats. They were campaigning on tax cuts for the middle class, right? So I think you're seeing a new Democrat Party. I think you're seeing some people who have said, hey, let's stop listening to our extremes. I think it's the same lesson that Republicans learned years ago with the Tea Party. So maybe they'll get some stuff accomplished.
All right, we're going to talk about local issues.
But by the
local
way,
race results
the
coming
current
up.
tax cut was for the middle class. Many people in the middle
was
class.
not.
It was.
Well, you have just
was.
recently Apple, for example. Apple says, and I wouldn't call them a conservative company overall. Apple just announced $2,500 bonus, and they said in it due to the tax cut.
Right, but how much money did they have overseas that they were trying to get back into the economy?
But it ultimately, you can't argue that it benefits people who are in the middle class.
The net effect of that tax cut was a net positive to companies and the higher ups
who hire people and provide jobs and give middle class people a lot of jobs, and they get a paycheck.
If that were the case, we would have not taken this long to see raises begin wages begin to rise.
People said they almost began immediately. How long do you think it takes for a business to turn around their systems
and
get
outside the
these
state of
things in
Louisiana,
place?
especially because we have our own issues with how we handled that. We'll move on. This is a conversation about the wall, about the tax cut we're going to continue to have for months and months. So we're going to move on. Quick break here. Back with the Wingin' It Wednesday panelists next. All right, welcome back to Wingin' It Wednesday, our panelists here. And we will start this local conversation off with Carol. The two tax measures failed. All the amendments passed. I think the biggest thing is that we're going to have the runoff in the Secretary of State's race. And I'm actually kind of surprised at who the runoff is between.
Yeah, isn't that something?
Josh Guillory, who was the Republican challenging Clay Higgins, he got to about 13%. He won't make the runoff.
That wasn't going anywhere.
It's the candidate from New Orleans and Kyle Ardwent, which is who was getting a lot of buzz. You know who I love just to see get the votes she did, and anyone who's used to watching these sort of things, she was never going to win it in a blowout. Is Heather Cloud? I think the story of Heather Cloud.
Yeah. Pretty amazing. She's got a future.
I was about to say,
she
even if
definitely
it's
has
not
a
her
future.
for this
Right.
job.
And so
I
does
think,
Josh Guillory, actually. And
yeah.
sometimes you see these candidates, and I know they both were probably sincere about running and all that, but this sets them up pretty well for some state and local races, well, actually state races, I think. And we would do well having both of them in the state house.
I don't want to get away from the local part.
Let's go.
But I do want to ask, do you think that same thing with all these other candidates who got close, where you have the Beto O'Rourke that got that close? I don't think if
he's
you
not
would have
going
said
away.
He's not going away. I don't think you're going to have. It looks like the Florida or the Georgia governor is going to be Brian Kemp.
Oh, absolutely.
But it doesn't look like she's going to go away.
No, no. Did you see her concession speech? Good Lord, it was like a call to arms.
Well, and I also think, too, there's going to be a huge challenge there because they had voting
getting back to
problems.
the local races.
Sorry, yes. Sorry.
I just want to make the one comment about Beto O'Rourke. There's two things. One, people are motivated for him, and two, the guy's got charisma.
Yeah, he does. He does.
Very popular with people in the South.
When I look at him, I see a lightweight,
Just
but
my
he
2
does
cents.
have charisma among that generation, that huge millennial generation that will be taking over the country, quaking in your boots, I'm sure. But anyway, on the local level,
yes.
The turnout. I tell you what, we were all winners in Lafayette Parish. To see a turnout of 48%, that's the latest count I saw. Louis Perrette, God bless him. I mean, he was in here day in and day out talking about turnout, talking about getting people out. And I tell you, he has to be thrilled. They ran out of stickers in some places. Yay. I mean, when
he
has that
invited
ever
Rob
happened?
and I. We visited with Louis so much that Rob and I have been invited to Thanksgiving dinner.
Well,
so
I would
we're
imagine
excited.
so.
Yeah,
And take him up on it because I'm sure
But
they
we're having
took
a
well
vote
at the Perrette
on
House.
what sides we have.
All right,
That's right,
So the other thing is, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this week was a big win for Lafayette. We got rid of Bernhardt Capital Partners. They're not going to take over our utility system. And we have the chance to getting, the best director we can. And hopefully, as Terry Hubal said on my show yesterday, we have some really talented people in the utility department. It would be a great thing to do as to open it up, and have some of those guys apply as well. The other thing is the 2 tax proposals that went down. I think this was the message election to our local leaders. Stop playing with the money. Start being serious about running this government, doing the basic things you need to do. We want some roads built. We want to continue to fix the drainage, that kind of thing. I think this really was a message that the mayor president came out at the last minute against the taxes. Well, that was sort of specious, in my opinion. If he's going to try to take credit for it, forget about it. There were so many people out there putting the facts out about why these 2 taxes should not pass. And I think the sheriff should be quaking in his boots right now.
We'll see. Warren, I want to ask you, do you think that, of all the drama, okay, the ups and downs, whether it's with LUS, whether it's are we going to have a tax? Okay, the taxes are on, but actually we're thinking about the next vote in December because we're going to be doing this in just another month, about a lot of different things. Does it kill any of the excitement or does it prolong the excitement?
I think it prolongs the excitement more than anything else. And the main thing I think that we're seeing happen on a local level is that we're no longer seeing an administration and a council that just is autocratic and just rubber stamps everything, whatever the administration wants, that the council just automatically votes, 9-3 or whatever it is, and that on the tax issues, people are just sitting there saying, where is the money being spent, and why do you need more of my money? I'll quote what old former senator from Texas said one time. I don't want to call his name, but he was talking about whenever he was going to vote for something that would increase spending on the federal level, and he says, I look at it and I say, is it worth taking the money out of the Dickey Flat family's pocket and giving it to somebody else in another state? And that's what I ask every time, and there's not a hell of a lot of programs that can say yes to.
That are worth that.
And that that this whole thing about just going out there and saying, well, it's for the good. You got to give us more money. We got to have this. We got to have that. People now are saying, like it is with your kids. Why? Mm-hmm. Why do you need that? Mm-hmm. Give me an American Express card. Well, you don't get it.
So, Stafford, someone equated yesterday in listening to some of the coverage. I don't remember where. It's been a long couple days. But equated voting to giving blood, where it's a hassle to fit into your schedule. You can think of a million other things to do, but you do it, makes you feel good, so you make it a habit. If we have these elections, now we're going to have December, now we're going to have February and March, okay? In the next few months, that's 3 more votes people are going to have before the spring. Do people just get into the habit, and is doing it frequently actually making people feel like it's not so painless?
Yeah, I mean, you should vote. Whether there's 1 election a year or 4 elections a year, get off your butt and go vote. I mean, we have 8 days of early voting?
A ton.
Yeah, it's so
and a lot of states don't have that. Some states have 1.
Yeah.
1 day. Yeah.
Go vote, you lazy. Who cares? Who cares if there's 4?
We're using that for a promo, baby.
Look, we're talking about the local stuff, and what I'd like to point out is I think what we learned with the tax shoot down yesterday was that if you're a special interest and you have the money, you can go out and hire community organizers, a la Michael Lunsford, to send out information about our community and get this kind of stuff shut down. And what he does works, point blank. And until somebody can come along that can afford to spend as much money as his backers do, they're going to continue to put out this type of stuff. We're still one of the lowest. We're still one of the lowest taxed property-wise in the United States. We're in the lower section of Louisiana, and our sales taxes are too high. So we've got a shifted burden to the consumer, and not enough to the property owner.
Let me ask you a question. I just want to ask. So despite who he is, what you don't like, and the past, okay, to have to have someone, because there are a lot of people that think he is the only person that's looking at certain numbers.
That's because they're not looking. And the reality is everything that he looks at is open and available to the public. The budgets are open.
Well, do people just not spend the time then?
They don't.
Hold the phone.
And I would like to just throw in here that there may be something, I understand it's your opinion, but I think the sentiment against taxes is still so strong that even if you didn't have the Lunsford part of it, I think people would still be saying no, because I think people, that level of frustration and that mantra just continues.
Well,
let me say one thing. The Supreme Court weighed in on denying speech to certain people and allowing speech to other people. Exactly. And that's what Stafford is talking about. He likes democracy, he wants people to go out and vote, but he doesn't want certain people to have the right to organize and to promote their point of view, which was reaffirmed by a number of things, including Citizens United, which struck down the portion of McCain-Feingold that limited political speech through campaign donations.
So if we look at it that way, Stafford, if we look at it that way, and it is a group that's organizing for political reasons.
Correct. So the Supreme Court actually just ruled on that again as well, right? He's a 501c4. The Supreme Court said 501c4s have to divulge their donors over $200 donations. So I anticipate that his donors are going to become publicly aware here soon, and people can see who they actually are.
Well, there's actually a bill in Congress to the Donor Privacy Act.
Let's finish.
So look at New Iberia and look at what New Iberia has done. New Iberia had an education system that was falling apart. They raised taxes. They had a police force that was non-existent. They raised taxes. Now their community is growing. Their businesses are growing, and their education system is getting better. I'm not saying that taxes are the solution for everything, but we're being irresponsible when we put out this idea that we're one of the highest tax areas in the United States. That is not true. The facts are Texas has significantly higher property taxes. When you get into, and it's on a curve, right? I explain to people all the time, when you get into the higher areas, because of our income taxes here, it balances itself out, right? My argument has been our taxes are not set up equitably in our community, period. And that's what I'd like to see us get back to. And when we shoot down property taxes, right, which we have some of the lowest around, I think the way that we get to more equitable funding of government and a more logical form of government is when we do it on the backs of property owners, right? Instead of everybody's paying, and instead of these ridiculously high sales taxes, 10.5 cents. That's insane.
But are we missing the boat if someone doesn't come along at some point and say that's enough? And what's that point?
Okay,
so there are some people who think they're at the point right now.
What is enough? That's a great question, right? Because the budget's open. We can go look at it. And listen, why were these taxes on the budget to begin with? Go walk through the courthouse and see that it's falling apart. And go to the top floor and see that I think they may have converted the top floor from an old jail to storage space.
Well, when they did that drainage rededication, they could have taken some of that money and fixed the garage.
That's a red herring, okay?
No, it's not a red herring. That's for real.
Okay.
That is for real. They don't even know what to do with that money. I'm sorry. That was an option.
Listen, don't sit here and scream for dedicated funds, which is the conservative platform.
Do not tell me you're serious about fixing things when you decide how the money goes.
I'm sorry. That's what I'm trying to point out. The rule
and by the
is,
way, I think it's my time to say something.
Well, hold on. We're going to let Warren get into here.
The reality is that we ask for dedicated funds, right? And then we get them, and we realize that we can't shift them around, right? Listen, the system is broken.
Yeah.
Right? Let's have more money going to the general fund and more money coming out, but we can't raise taxes to get money into the general fund.
We're going to get to Carol to wrap it up, but Warren, I just want you to.
There's not enough time.
I just want you to put.
I just wanted to say median income too is a big reason we don't have high enough salaries. People don't want to pay more taxes, depending on whatever it is, sales tax, property tax. People don't. Anyway,
Warren, where is the cap? Because to some people, you're already at the cap. To Stafford, he thinks the investment is worth it. It all comes down to who you elect, though, really, on where this is going to go.
Yeah, but it also comes down to what are you getting for your money.
Correct, the money.
And you go out there and Stafford keeps saying, well, if you put more money into schools, then you're going to have better education. If that's the case, then New Orleans, Washington, D.C., and Detroit should have the best schools in the world. Yes, and it's just not the case. And so you look at these things about these public groups like Michael Lunsford or whatever. My God, look what the government has at their disposal. That they're the ones who's able to flood the airways with anything they want to and all of that. But that when you stop and look at it, we turn around over and over and over and say we gotta have a tax for this, we gotta have a tax for that, and then it doesn't get fixed. It's just like the highway system here. How much money actually goes to the roads? It's just like drainage. How much that money actually goes, and what Stafford keeps talking about is the same thing I keep harking on, and that is it's such an inequity about how money is distributed. We got plenty of money coming in, but where does it go?
I want to have time to talk about LUS, but Carol, I said I'd give you some time. Take about 30 seconds if you want to wrap this up.
Well, frankly, I mean, if you want to hurt businesses even more, that these are a lot of business people who are, you can laugh all you want, Stafford, but there are a lot of businesses in this parish that are struggling. And maybe you don't see that, but a lot of business people do, and they're very worried about the inordinate burden on businesses in terms of property taxes. 60%, as the assessor said on my show yesterday, 60% falls on businesses. So when you try to adjust property taxes upward, there's a reason why these business owners get together and finally represent their own interests. Why shouldn't they? Why shouldn't they be able to represent their own interests? You had your say. In Texas, they have no personal income tax. I'd like to see us go to Texas and take a look at how they do their taxing. And by the way, and let's take a look at the tribute.
North Shore, highest taxing on public schools, highest scores.
Stop it. Take a look at the tribute that our politicians extract from businesses before they even can come into this state, and you'll see why businesses don't want to come here, and we can't get higher salaries for people.
All right, we're wrapping it up, guys, for this topic. Thank you.
232-1542 if you want to get in on the conversation at 7:43.
Stuff from the present.
Hey, Warren.
All right, behave, children.
Warren, I'll give you a platform here if you'd like to tell that joke to the masses.
He'd have to adapt it. He would have to change the language.
Hey, by the way, this is pretty unrelated, but this is I'm seeing a bunch of wire reports on this. So there's a new multi-billion-dollar Boeing program. It's the 737 MAX, the 737 aircraft, the most used commercial aircraft around the world.
Yes.
There's a little problem in the manual for glide scope in landing procedures. They think it might have had something to do with that Indonesia crash, so they're sending out new manuals today.
I just saw that. Something about they died.
Yes. Anyway, more on that coming up.
Okay, here's the deal. Let's do a little fact check. 501c4 donors do not have to disclose unless they endorse candidates, and Citizens for New Louisiana, that's the one you're talking about, does not endorse candidates.
They just deal with issues.
Is that what you're saying? They run political
money.
ads.
The money issues.
But if they're on issues and not candidates, that might be your...
Yeah, but no. The recent ruling and what it was, the Supreme Court refused to take up a decision that was made at a lower court level.
That's correct, and that is why they're pushing the Donor Privacy Act in Congress.
Okay, but here's what my thing that I find so interesting is I wish that if there were a group of citizens who want to see these taxes passed, why not form a group like this other one?
So
it's called government.
That's a great point, right? Why don't we get
Why
don't we get a group of representatives to look at where we're deficient, and then put them together and figure out where we're having problems funding and things that we need to make priorities, and then they can make suggestions to the community as to where we need to fund it. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm talking about ads.
Yeah, it's completely
I'm
one-sided.
talking about advertising.
Because that's what just happened. We elected representatives. We put a commission of city representatives together to say, hey, we got to look at the areas where we're deficient
but that's not the way
and make recommendations.
That doesn't the way
if one
it
side
works.
is doing this and one side has a loud mouth,
then
the
the
only
other
way to
side
come out
needs
of this
to
you need to
come
have a
back.
loud mouth. So why isn't that happening?
It's a loud mouth
we
with
need
money.
more loud mouths.
Well, I'm sure
there's
there's
the government
people on
does
the
it?
other side that have money.
That's a great point.
I mean, people who have a lot to say should put their money where their mouth is.
Okay, Warren.
We
didn't put you in that short chair, so you're not in timeout.
When we're talking about all these groups, why don't we have this group? Why don't we have that group? Why don't these get together? Hell, there are thousands of them out there. You look at what you had just a few years ago with Acorn. Acorn was what did they get? They got something like $1.5 billion funded from the government.
We have 5 minutes. I do want to have a chance to talk about LUS.
Yeah, but that's a great point.
Yeah, it's a great point,
Let's talk about it again next week.
We will.
Our State Department does it all the time through the U.S. Agency for International Development.
So
all right, let's go.
So next gen is off the table at this point, and the resolution had full support. William Terrio introduced resolution. Warren, your thoughts about this? How do we move forward? And in your lifetime, do we see someone else who wants to buy, sell, or lease LUS?
I think that you have seen someone who wanted to buy, sell, or lease LUS for a long time now. I mean, that it comes up periodically that somebody will come in and say they want to take a look at it, and that will it ever happen? I don't know, probably will at some point, but you know, these things, it's kind of like the way it was done was the big downfall. You know, let's go back to the library tax, you know, and the old thing is don't prove your negatives. And so the negative on this thing was it was a sweetheart deal. It was done behind closed doors. Nobody else was going to get a chance. We were going to run it through. And that was a big negative, and that's why everybody turned against it. I mean, you know, from other reasons, but I think that was a big reason that sparked the flame.
Carol?
In Mr. Boudreau's rationale, when he was making the explanation at the LPUA about why he put in his resolution, he said, well, he was apologizing virtually to Mr. Robideau for, you know, going against him this one time, you know, and putting in this resolution. And he said, well, you know, and we had to bounce out those courthouse proposals because you know, those requests for proposals. And this will lead to the least transparent administration in my knowledge in Lafayette, in my long history in Lafayette. I mean, they didn't put out a request for proposals on the courthouse. It was a request for qualifications, and then the mayor-president, in order to avoid a spectacle, he chose whoever would be. In the Bernhard case, he negotiated for over a year in secret, during which time some serious decisions were made on about the utility system that no one knew. He was negotiating in secret at the time. Now we're talking about the parking garage, and we have a secret buyer, and we're not going to talk about it. Here we go again.
All right, Stafford, what do you see in the next months, weeks, years?
I think if we've, and Karen and I agree on this pretty significantly, I think if we saw anything, we saw somebody sit down, look at their proposal, and say, hey, we can do this without giving away all the what we own, right? And so I hope what happens is they look at the plan, they figure out where they want to get greener, where they want to get more lean, and where they want to get more efficient. They put the plan together, and they bring the bond issue to the community. I know that was attempted one time under Huval at $240 million, and it was pulled kind of the last second. I know that there was somebody in the community who's an activist for green energy that wasn't happy with the type of engine they wanted to use. But I hope that we begin to lead the way. I'd like to see us begin to lead the way as a green energy community, one that we own personally. Also, I'd like to see us continue to give back to the government the way that LUS does. Mm-hmm. This is like it or not, we have a socialized power production system in Lafayette, owned by the community, owned by each one of its residents, that puts a lot of money back into it. And so I'm proud of LUS. I think that Joel is going to spend a lot of time licking his wounds with this. That being said, the voters have a notoriously short memory. They're kind of like goldfish.
Not anymore.
Well, we'll see.
I totally disagree.
We'll see,
Bernie.
because it's going to be him, Terrio, and one other person. We don't know who that one other person is yet, right? Mm-hmm. So, good luck to him. I mean, he's got a ton of money. He's got the right money people behind him. So it should be an interesting race. But at the end of the day, I'm proud of the work that was done by everybody in the community to get this shut down.
I will say this. I had a water break in my front yard over the weekend, and when we didn't know any of this stuff was happening. I mean, we knew the meeting was going to happen at LCG, and I literally texted Bernie because it took 12 minutes after I called for someone to be digging in my front yard to fix it. And I said 12 minutes, and then I sent it to Bernie, and I was like, should we sell it? Should we, have someone else manage LUS?
Let me say something real quick, because Terry was on my show for an hour yesterday afternoon and went into all those details about how they are trying and they are transitioning to wind energy. They're using a lot of wind energy where it makes sense. They have a fiduciary responsibility to not rule by ideology, which is what a lot of the green people want us to do, but to rule by reality and to use all forms of energy where they make sense. And that is why our utility system has been so well run.
Right.
I mean, they'll do the best they can to transition to sustainability, but in some cases it's not possible.
Warren, 30 seconds, sir.
I want to go back and digress just a little bit on.
I'll kill this spot then.
On taxes and to education.
Yeah.
if you go back a few years ago, we had a referendum on taxes came up to have the highest paid school teachers in the state.
Uh-huh.
And the Republican caucus was opposed to it. The Democrats were opposed to it. The chamber was opposed to it, and it got shot down. They brought it back up a little while later with some different language and all that. All of those groups supported it, and it passed. And what we were told, if this passes, we're going to have the highest paid teachers in the state. You're going to have lower dropout rates. You're going to have higher test scores, and then everything is going to be better. And we passed it. And what happened? Dropout rate went up. Dropout rate went up. Test scores went down. And it's the same old thing, same old cycle.
Because
Give us more money, and we'll do a better job.
Because it's not about the money.
Okay.
Question real quick. Did y'all kick Brian Pope off the Republican Parish Executive Committee yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
I don't look. It may be automatic according to some legal people. It may just be automatic.
All right, Wingin'
Well,
Wednesday.
he's appealing it, so
brought to you
they're
each
going to
and
wait
every
for
week by our
that.
friends
He appeals everything, doesn't
I know.
LABI, Louisiana Association of
They
Business.
got to get
tired.
too good of a win streak on those appeals.
Carol Ross this afternoon at 2 o'clock on the Ross Report here at News Talk 96.5 KPEL, and then our panelists will join us next week again, as they do at 7 o'clock on Wednesday mornings. Quick stop for news, and then we relax with some wine after yesterday's busy day. Come
Bring
back.
it on, baby.